So can we start with you telling me your name and where you live and just basic information like that?
Hi, my my name is Leonard Dixon, and I live in Vancouver, Washington, which is really just a suburb of Portland, Oregon. So I'm just a few minutes away from Portland. And uh, are there any other basics you want to know? Or
Not for now. First question is, how did you find out about Subud and how did you eventually come into Subud?
Yes, it is an interesting story. And what happened was I was living in North Beach in San Francisco during the beatnik era. And I would tend to hang out in a park in the North Beach area. I think it was called Grant Park. And I would go there in the evening and walk around and say hi to people. Anyway, there was someone I kept bumping into and chatting with, a tall guy with a beard. And, by about the second or third time I ran into him there, he started to mention a group that he had been in. And he had been a member of the group for a whole 6 months. And that impressed me because in those days, people tried spiritual paths and this, that, and the other for like a couple of weeks, maybe. So the fact that someone was in it for a whole 6 months was a big deal for me. Anyway, that was Robert Feltman. And he sadly passed on about a year or two ago. Anywho, then as I recall it, some of the details are a little fuzzy, but the essence is there. One day I went to the park and didn't see him. And then I thought, well, I think I'll try to find the building where this is. And I can't remember if he had told me what days it meets, but I knew it was in the early evening on those days. And I knew the street it was on. It was on Polk Avenue, I think it is, or Polk Street. Anyway, and that's in that neighborhood. Let's see, Polk Street would be about 4 miles long, something like that. So I walked over to Polk Street. I didn't have the exact address, but I knew it had to be in a building of the type that hosts groups. And so I saw a couple of buildings like that. I think the very first building that looked like that type was the first one I walked into. Buildings like that, you can go in the entrance and there's like a plaque near the door saying what groups meet there. And it didn't mention Subud. So I went across the street to another building, and that building did have a plaque that said Subud, and it gave the floor. I think it was either the third floor or maybe the fourth floor. Anyway, so I pressed the elevator button, and the really amazing part of this is that the elevator came down and a whole bunch of people came out. About 8 or 10 people came out. And one of them was a brown-skinned man with a funny hat, as I like to say. And so then I went upstairs and there were still people up there. And they said, "Oh, you just missed Bapak." So after Robert Feltman, Bapak was the second person that I met in Subud. Didn't talk with him, but saw him. Anyway, so that got started. At that time, they were letting people who had already been a candidate be opened by Bapak during his visit. So in other words, he would be in town for several days and give talks and whatnot. And then people that had already been for, at least a week or whatever, a candidate could be opened if they wanted to by Bapak during that trip. But since I had just come and hadn't already been a candidate, I didn't qualify for that. And it was a good thing because based on the lifestyle I had been living, it was a good thing for me to go there for the 3 months and wait in order to be opened. And then then the 3 months. Oh, and by the way, one of the other candidates who got open was started being a probationer just a little bit before I was. So he was opened the week before I was, and that was Allen Ginsberg,
Wow.
who I had met a few times socially. I knew 2 or 3 of the beat poets. One in particular who is still with us, Gary Snyder. I would chat with him a lot. And so then I got opened and I became close friends with the Tarantino family. And of course, Rashad was one of the people at my opening. I can envision the others, but Peter Filippelli, I think, was there also. And Scott, what's his first name?
Hubert or
Yes.
Halim.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So those 3 were at the opening, and I think 1 or 2 other helpers. And so I finally got open and stayed in San Francisco for about 3 years or so. And after 3 or maybe 4 years, maybe 4 years, I moved down to Los Angeles. Can't recall why exactly, but I did. And yeah.
So I have a question. What do you remember the date that you first came to that building when Bapak was there?
It was 1963. I think I was open in December, so maybe September, maybe. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Are you looking at a list of his travels? You can.
No, I just wanted to pin down that date. So
Yeah, it was either. Yeah, it was either September 63 or something very close to that.
Yeah.
Like early October, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Late August even. So something like that, because I knew I had to wait for 3 months. And I think I was open on December. Oh, I actually have a card somewhere. I didn't think to have it in front of me, but I have a card, and it says the exact date. December something. Yeah, can't remember exactly.
Yeah. So in your years in Subud, have you had a chance to be around Bapak very much?
Not as much as I would have liked to, but some of my strongest experiences had to do with him. I, of course, went to Skymont, and he stayed there for about a week. And I had a couple of strong experiences there. The I should write these down, but quite a few of them are still in my memory. The 2 strongest things that I can recall that have to do with Bapak while I was at Skymont, other than the whole experience, of course, was I think the first one was I was taking a walk outside in the evening, not expecting anything in particular, and I happened to be walking by the place called the Stone House, which is one of the homes there. And Bapak happened to be standing out on the porch. So, and he was looking up at the landscape and the trees and the evening sky and maybe the moon. And so I was about 10 feet from him, something like that. And so I turned and looked at what he was looking at, and I started seeing it as if through his eyes. So in other words, things looked different than they would have normally looked to me. So, or maybe not through his eyes, but in his presence, seeing through my real eyes or something like that. So that was something out of the ordinary that stuck in my memory. The other thing I recall is that they had a testing session where they were testing in the new national committee, and they were testing in the what I think were the very first group of national helpers. I think were tested in there. Prior to that, there weren't any national helpers. And what happened was so he was up on the stage in the main hall. Yeah, there was a fairly large hall that had a stage in it in Skymont. And there was usually someone else taping his talks, but for some reason that person wasn't available. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I volunteered to go up on the stage with all of the things that get tapes. So we were using ordinary, tapes, and so doing a tape of his talking. So I was about 5 feet from Bapak, and what stood out was as he was testing various people, either to be on the new national committee, which then of course became Oswald Lake, and that other fellow I knew, I can't think of his name at the moment, but became the vice chair. And what happened was I was suddenly able to see the results of the testing as they happened. And once again, kind of like seeing the testing through his eyes. So I could tell when there was yeses and nos for various people, even though it might not have been obvious from the things that they did with their arms and stuff. So I could take part in the testing. And so then that's again when he tested in the new, which I think was the first group of national helpers in the United States anyway. And so that was Patricia White, and I'm Happy English, and I'll think of their names. I can image the faces, but I can't think of all the names right.
Yeah, I don't think we need that. Just
okay. Yeah. Anyway, you could look that up. So, Herbert McWillis was in that group. Yeah. So I saw them all tested in. And then in the meantime, remember I had moved down to LA around 1967 or 68 or so. And then became a very nice string of visits by Bapak almost every year. So he would take a world tour, and most of his visits wound up at the Miramar Hotel in Santa Monica. And so I got to go to all of those. And of course, those were all strong experiences. One kind of silly thing that happened that sticks out in my mind was I was up on the 10th floor where Bapak stayed. I think partly because I was also sleeping in one of the other rooms there on the 10th floor. And I was standing in the hallway and Bapak came out and asked me what time it was. I looked at my watch, which was the usual wind-up watch. We didn't have any digital watches yet, at least I didn't. And I told him the time. It turned out, I didn't realize it at the time, but it turned out that my watch was fast about a half hour, which is weird because usually if a watch is off, it stops and goes slow,
Mhm.
and you know, and then gives an old time. But this was looking into the future somehow. And what happened was, and it's odd that his suite didn't have clocks in it, so he could tell by himself. But anyway, so he wound up going downstairs a half hour too early when people were still milling around in the hallway. And of course, that isn't what he likes at all. So so I like to brag that that's the last time he ever asked me what the time was. uh, uh,
Yeah.
yes. So he had to wait while people went and sat down and got quiet and so on and so forth. A couple of other things happened on his trips to Los Angeles that stand out. One was, and again, this happened at the Miramar. Bapak suddenly decided that he wanted to go visit the uh, famous family.
Musics.
No, oh, he went there also. That's a different story. But he wanted to go from the Miramar to visit
Uh,
famous family. She's still alive, and he passed on about a year ago.
yeah.
Oh yeah, the Richmonds. Yeah, so he wanted to go visit the Richmonds.
Peter Mark Richmond.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I was chosen to lead the convoy there. There were about 3 of us cars. Bapak wasn't in my car, but he was in the car just behind me. And I thought I knew how to get there, and I thought I had one of those directories with addresses on it. I knew what part of town it was in. It's in the South Hills of the San Fernando Valley, and that much I knew. So we went up the highway. I don't think there were even interstate highways yet. So we went up the highway that goes from Santa Monica into the valley, and then I took a turn, and then I noticed I didn't have the address on me, and I thought, well, after driving uphill, I thought my thought was that since I knew the names of the people, and pretty much everyone has a phone book handy, that I would stop in the nearest house and knock on the door and ask to use their phone book and then phone them and see what their address was and how to get there from where I was. And when I knocked on the door, out came Helen Richmond. So I was led to the right place without knowing it.
That's pretty interesting.
Yes, and when she was on CalChat a couple weeks ago or so, or maybe it was last month, I mentioned that story to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, I can recall all of that." Yeah, and her children were still very small, so I never got to know them back then. But of course, now I know them via Facebook.
Yeah.
So Helen is still with us and still very nice and nice to talk to. And she's done a couple of CalChat sessions. It might be that you were on it also at the same time. The third thing did have to do with the musics. the Musics were living, oh, I used to know their address, Oxford Place or something like that. Uh, anyway, they were living maybe not right in Santa Monica, but close to it. And they had invited Bapak to stay in their home, and so they gave him the master bedroom up on the top floor, or the second floor. And the other tie-in was that for some reason they had asked me, I can't remember why, but both of the Musics wanted to attend a talk by Bapak in the evening. And for some reason, they wanted me to stay guard in their home, to stay in the living room. And I don't recall exactly why they wanted me to do that, but I did. And then my two main memories are when they finally came home, they brought Bapak, and I recall seeing him right after the talk, seeming about a foot or two shorter than he usually seems. I don't know what his actual height is, but he seems very large most of the time. But this time he seemed like just a little old man. So in other words, he had given his all in the talk, and he could still walk just fine. He just seemed smaller and slightly more frail.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and
I've had that experience too.
oh yeah. And then what happened was, I think they asked me to stay guard there downstairs for longer. I don't recall why. Maybe there was some problem with someone breaking into local homes or something. Don't recall the reason, but so I stayed downstairs sitting on a sofa and staying awake. I didn't go to sleep on it. In fact, a little bit later on, I wound up going home to go to sleep. But in the meantime, while I was sitting on the sofa, after a while, I suddenly had an experience like I was in a rocket headed to outer space. So I kept going up, 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 like when some people might say, like going into my crown chakra or something like that. But it seemed like I was at a jet spaceship going vertical up, and and that lasted for some time. So that lasted for maybe an hour, that experience. And the next day, I mentioned something about it to Henrietta, and she said, "Oh yeah, you were sitting right under Bapak's bed."
But
So,
do you remember any details of that experience?
just that it had that expansive, higher and higher feeling to it.
Hmm.
And so can't recall anything else about it. There were probably a little bit in the way of visions, but it was more of a feeling than a seeing anything in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and so those are some of my experiences that I'm tying with Bapak, because in my past, I've not recently, but at least during all the time that Bapak was alive, I was I either had agoraphobia with acrophobia, so problem with open spaces and heights, so I couldn't fly, certainly not any distance. And or if I felt a little bit more energy, like I did manage to travel to Skymont and back. So during that period, I could have theoretically made some plane trips, like for example, to go to Chalandak, but I couldn't afford it. So either I didn't have the money and or I had a problem with plane flights, and it's a long swim. So so I haven't ever been to Indonesia. I as a kind of a side thing, I might also say that I've never been into Bapak imitation particularly. Since I was a smoker for a while, I did try crate decks, but partly because I like them, not to imitate Bapak. But I never sent a name, sent away for a Muslim name, and I never got to wearing the patches and whatnot, hats and stuff like that. And I didn't wear what are those male skirts?
Sarong.
Yeah. So it's a wrong style for me. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
have you had any other experiences, not necessarily with Babak, but other spiritual kind of experiences that came to through Subud?
Yeah. The specific ones with details that I remember the most do have to do with Bapak. Kind of a general. Oh, yeah. I'm going back to shortly after I was open. Was that my life suddenly took a turnaround. I had been a on the road kind of beatnik. I and I wound up quitting school twice to hitchhike with no money west to San Francisco. Well, I was going to school at the University of Illinois, so that was quite a trip, 2 times, and then experimenting with drugs a little bit, not like heroin type, but I would smoke pot. Oh, I was like I said, I knew at least 2 of the beatnik poets who became famous. But I was also a friend with someone whose name I can never remember when I want to. I can always look it up on the internet because I know how to do it. But he became famous later on. During the time I knew him, we would just walk around town smoking small little rolled up cigarettes, so to speak. Anyway, he was the one that got all the famous San Francisco bands together. So he became responsible for the popularity of Janis Joplin and the groups like that.
Do you know the name of that person?
I know it. It tends not to come to me. I have to look it up. I could go into my folder files on my computer and look it up. He started an event called the Summer of Love. He was also the head of something that became known as the Family Dog, which is the group that put on all of those concerts with Jimi Hendrix. What's that super famous group that was there at the time?
So
Anyway.
you mentioned you were open at the same time as Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah, one week different. Yeah, or a few days different. Yeah.
Do you remember if he came to Lodihan very much after that?
No, he didn't. And so he was one of those people that likes to try things and see, oh, what's this like? Try it. I'm pretty sure he came for a while. It's also difficult for people that have become famous to stay in Subud. That was also true of my old and dear and still alive friend, Daniel Pinkwater, whom you may have heard of. He's an author that became famous, and he was open in New York City because he knew about it from me. But he didn't stay in because people were always asking him for money. Yeah. I still run into him occasionally Twitter or something like that. So
You mentioned Gary Snyder too. You said he's still alive.
yes.
Are you still in contact with him?
No, I tried. He actually has a Facebook profile, personal profile, and I did a friend asking thing, but he hasn't accepted yet. And of course, I haven't become famous. It might be that you think I'm famous, but it hasn't spread to the world in general. I think what I need is for someone to make me a Wikipedia page. Uh, anyway, so so prior to being open, my lifestyle was fairly wild. Staying up all night, living in North Beach, um, smoking. Oh yeah, and I also went through a period of taking methamphetamine in a form where you would drop it into like a cup of tea, and but I could see what it was doing to people that took it regularly, so I made sure that I didn't take it regularly. So just maybe once a week instead of like 3 times a day. And I really liked that, but I knew it was very habit forming and not good in the long run. So I stopped that also. And of course, that was prior to becoming a candidate. Oh, while I was a candidate, uh, remember I was told about Subud by Robert Feltman. I also became friends with Phil Quackenbush, also known as
Halim. Yeah.
Halim, yeah. And he's gone too now. But anyway, so we were friends for a while. In fact, we're the ones that started that store that you know about. That yeah.
Words and music.
Yes, thank you for yeah. Thanks for the memory. Oh, actually, I think you took a couple photos of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was nice for a while. And then we also shared a multi-bedroom suite up in the top of the same building for a while. And I can still remember that Halim got it up there. Oh, he had an upright piano, and he managed to somehow get it up there. And then he decided to get it back out when he moved out by lowering it down with a winch and a rope. And the problem was he got his arm on the rope, and it became close to a major accident, but it turned out okay. So he wasn't harmed by it. Anyway, so I was, what else about my early life? There are all kinds of things. I was just into everything. And when I got open, there was this urge to turn my life around and become more normal. Not that I'm totally normal now, but do more ordinary things like go back to school, for example. I had twice left the University of Illinois in midterm, by the way, getting a slate of Fs each time, and gone to San Francisco each time. And so I went back to school. I think I went to San Francisco City College for a little while. And then after I moved down to Los Angeles, I lived for a while in names. I'm not good with names. Names of ancient Renaissance composers. I can give you those, but people I've known for 50 years personally, I have no idea what their names are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Taylor in Los Angeles. He's gone now. His daughter is active. Alima Taylor, and he used to be Hubert, and then got another name Funny, I can't think of his newer first name. Anyway, he had to go on a long trip, so I stayed in his little house in South Pasadena, which is still there near the railroad tracks. And he let me stay there for free. And while I was there, I went to Cal State Los Angeles school and finished up my bachelor degree. So I did all kinds of relatively normal things. So my there was a sudden 180 turn in my life at that time.
Yeah.
And so there was that becoming relatively normal, going to group Ladihans. I went quite a while before I tried to become a helper. I only became a helper just about 10 or 15 years ago, something like that. Can't remember the date. I have a helper card somewhere. And a lot of it had to do with becoming friends with people. Like I said, when I lived in San Francisco, my main friends were the Tarantinos, who are still with us, and their daughter Rosetta, who at that time was 3 years old, and now she's a grandmother.
Yeah.
That's happened with a couple of other kids that I've known who were there, where I knew them when they were newborns, and now they're grandparents. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I tied in with the and again names. How could I forget that name? Not Weisinger, but oh my God. One of their daughters is Rosetta Coach. Both of the parents are gone now.
Okay.
Does that ring any bells?
Joe Coach? Are you talking about Joe Coach?
No, not his parents, but her parents.
Okay, the Weinsteins.
Yes, thank you.
Anna P. Weinstein.
Yes. So I became friends with them. And one thing that was interesting, and this went on for a couple of years, was that I was one of the few people that Hanafi would talk to. So I would take long trips with him here and there, and for a while he lived in La Habra, and then later on they had a nice place in Corona del Mar. So I used to go and visit them, and I got to be friends with their kids, including Rowena Weinstein,
Yeah.
who became Rosetta. So I knew a Rosetta. I forget her original name, but so I knew a Rosetta with the Tarantinos, and then with the Weinsteins. And it turns out they have the exact same birth date and the same year.
Wow.
Yeah. So they not only wound up with the same name, but they have a lot more in common. I don't know that they know each other very well, but they've probably seen each other at congresses and whatnot. And their sons and whatnot. So it wasn't just the girl. So with the Tarantinos, I became friends with Richard. But then I left before Edward was born, or maybe right around the same time he was born. So I never got to know Edward Tarantino. And of course, I'm friends with the Tarantino. Oh, not Tarantino. The Weinstein boy that's famous for having art galleries.
Roland.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, I couldn't think of his first name right away. That weird. Oh my God. So yeah, I got to know him, and I've been to at least one of his galleries. When he had one in the Portland at one time.
Okay.
Now he's down in LA or something. So I've been married twice. One other thing that was a strong experience in my life was being involved with the Manuka event, which I guess we started about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think they said maybe the manager or something said we had been there for 30 years, or maybe even 31. And I only missed one of them because I was up in Anchorage with my first wife, and I didn't feel like flying all the way down just for that. So I met my first wife at Manuka. I don't think it was at the first one, but maybe the second or third one. And we got married, and she lived up in Anchorage, so I moved up there with her for about a year and a half. And then we're still close, but we decided to part ways for whatever reason. So what happened with Manuka was that the Chafitzes started it, mainly Hamilton, although I think his wife was involved. And I was good friends with them, so I helped him with it. So I was his right-hand man. One thing I recall is, like nowadays, we type something up and send out an email blast to everyone on Earth having to do with dates and links and details and stuff like that. But back then, we had to type something up and print a bunch of copies and put it into envelopes with stamps and mail it to everyone. So things were different back then. we did have ordinary lights. We didn't have to do it by a campfire, but it was a very old-fashioned way of doing things. And it was like that for the first few years that we did it. So anyway, by the second year of Manuka, maybe the third, I can't remember if the transition was made that I took over his job as a site coordinator and organizer and all of that. It's a regional helper event. They control the content of it, but as the site coordinator, I would make up the schedule and print it out and set up the timings with the office and organize it and also advertise it and all of that sort of thing. So I did that for 7 years in a row, and then I was kind of the co-coordinator a couple of times with someone. I handed off the job to someone else, and I stayed on to help him. And doing all that for Manuka and just going up there all the time is a big thing for me. Now I'm a so-called regional helper. And so the last time we had Manuka a couple of years ago, I helped to organize that part of it. And we're having it again this coming November. And that's on the assumption that there's no new wave, so to speak.
Yeah.
They call the current one Omicron, and my joke is, I hope there isn't a P-macron and a Q-macron. So,
Okay.
Spiritual, yeah, it's hard to hang a hat on that. One thing that I like to point out, and I'm not totally sure this is true, but it seems to be, and that is there's a point at which my sense of need of doing a group Latihan with the usual stand up with your eyes closed and walk around and jump up and down kind of a thing, I don't have as much need for that because it feels like I have the Latihan with me all the time. And so instead of going to the hall twice a week and getting quiet for an hour, I do the opposite. I twice a week I get out of Latihan by turning on the TV and watching the news. So I'm kidding, of course, but
Okay.
so it's and one thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to remember who famously said, and this is one of the elder members from like the first wave, said, as soon as I say begin, my Latihan stops.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, someone fairly famous said that. Yeah, can't recall who. So I seem to have reached that stage. I still do hope to go back to Latihan when they feel a little bit safer. They are happening in Portland, but I'm still a bit of a stay-at-homer, home guy, and I haven't gone into Portland at all for several months. But I hope to do that soon. So, and get more exercise and get my energy back. I'm sitting too much.
So I have a question.
Yes.
How has being in Subud affected your relationships with people, different people in general?
Ah, yes. Good question. My sense of compassion and empathy has gotten quite a bit better. And I was just going to say I'm the most humble person that you can imagine. But yeah, so I care more about what other people are up to and what they're doing and what they're going through, and I try not to fix everyone, but I do what I can. What happened to me about 10 or 12 years ago was I was going to a event in the evening in downtown Portland, and I think the place I needed to go to was several blocks from where I had parked, so I had to walk a few blocks, and it was sub-freezing. I found out later it was 26 degrees. That number stays in my head. And what happened was I was walking by some buildings, like office buildings of the kind that have an entrance where the doors aren't open, but they're set back like 8 or 10 feet, so there's a little bit of shelter. And there was someone lying in one of those trying to sleep in sub-freezing weather, and he didn't even have a blanket. He had a some kind of coat, and that was it. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? And then I walked a little bit further, and then about a half a block later, I saw a second person in the same situation, in something similar. And that wakened me to what's going on here. And I found out that there's just a lot of homeless people around. And so I started going to a place in Portland that helps the homeless. They at that time they had a central location in the downtown area, and now it's on the east side, the run by the same people. So I started working with them. I started getting supplies like blankets and flashlights, tarps, and canned soup and whatever. And I started buying that and taking it to the homeless. At first, what I discovered was there were a lot of homeless living under the bridges that cross the Willamette River from downtown to the east side. You've probably been across some of those. There's about not so much the super high ones, because but the 4 or so ones that are a little bit lower down, where there's places underneath that provide shelter. And there would be like 100 under each bridge, 100 people. So, and I found out the best place to get supplies, which I still do, is from Walmart. You get a nice big fleece blanket for $4.88, and if you went to the Goodwill, it would be like $15 for the same item.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I even looked into the idea of buying big swaths of cloths and cutting it up, but that would still be more expensive than going to Goodwill and buying them all ready to go. And flashlights there are $1 each. Trying to see if oh, here's one. Yeah. So yeah, these are $1 each. I won't turn it on right at you, but I'll turn it like that. So they're quite bright.
Yeah.
$1, including batteries. So sounds like an ad for Walmart, but that's where I go to get stuff for the homeless. Tarps, $3.80 something, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I've been doing that ever since. Now, what has happened more recently is my energy is dissipated. So it's been several years since I went down under the bridges in Portland, because that's a bit of a ways for me. It's a bit of a walk, because you have to park and then bring everything over. So what I do is there's a group called Free Hot Soup that exists also in the Vancouver, Washington area. So I just go to where they're going. They give out a lot of hot food to people, and people expect them at certain times. So they attract a big crowd of homeless people, and I put the stuff out there, like some tarps and whatnot. And so I still do that. So my sense of empathy and compassion has increased for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about fear?
That's gotten better. Like I said, of course, phobias and panic attacks aren't exactly the same as fear. They tie in a little bit, but they're not exactly the same. Anyway, so I have become able to fly. I took a plane down to Albuquerque and then later on back for the National Congress. What was that, about 3 years ago now? Boy, seems like yesterday, but it definitely wasn't during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it was at least 2 years ago. Yeah. And so I was able to do that. I was a little bit what you might call pre-anxious on the trip there, but not bad. I made it fine. And as opposed to, I can still remember once when I was flying with a friend from San Francisco to LA, I guess prior to my moving to LA, I was still living in San Francisco. I was traveling with a friend down there, and I thought, well, I'll look at one of the picture books on the way down there. And it's a short trip. That's about 40 minutes, not 3 hours. So I picked up one of those big, colorful magazines, like a Vogue magazine, nice and thick,
Mm-hmm.
with slick, heavy paper, And I started looking at it, and then I just froze, and my hand closed on the. So I was I'm holding it like this, and held it for the rest of the trip. When I was done with the trip, just out of curiosity, I opened the thick magazine, and it was wetted all the way through by my palm sweat.
Oh.
Every page in it was wet for about an inch from where I was holding it, all the way through, just to give you an idea of how I could do planes in the past.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't have much fear. Since since I'm not steady afoot lately, I need more exercise. I'm careful when I move. So I watch myself so I don't take a nasty fall. But I wouldn't call that fear. That's just being careful. So yeah, I don't have a lot of fear, I don't think.
Is that related to being in Subud?
Not necessarily. I was fairly fearless when I was younger. Like I said, of course, I had tons of energy then, but twice I actually, let's see, and then other time, yeah. So I've made 3 or 4 or 5 cross-country trips without any money, just hitchhiking and or taking a train, a boxcar.
Hmm.
So so I wouldn't say low fear is part of Subud particularly. Like I said, I did have that period of quite a few years of having open spaces agoraphobia, which actually started not too long after I was open. And I think it was a result of my very sudden change of lifestyle, just going through so many changes and that 180 turn that I made
Yeah.
after I was open. So I think that led to it. So I had uh, uh, developed a problem with open spaces when I lived in San Francisco and then down in LA. It did go away for a while, luckily, especially during that trip to Sky Mountain back. But then it came back after a while. I can't remember the dates exactly, but of when I had it. So I had that problem for quite a while, and maybe a total of 20 or 30 years off and on.
Hmm.
Now it's a lot better. So I can, oh, and also back then, when I was having that problem, if I had to travel any distance, I waited till it was overcast because then the sense of open spaces was better. So if you have good cloud cover, there isn't that sense of being in infinite space.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe, but it's part of having that particular phobia. So I could recall driving up Highway 99 in California and waiting for a period of time where it would be cloudy the whole way. So,
So how would you value your experience of being in Subud over the years?
well, I would give it an A plus. I I have become also the things about feeling like I have the Latihan in me, at least to some extent, all the time, and don't have as much of a need for the standard jumping up and down thing. I do occasionally. I do like if I'm going to do a testing session, especially with friends, I'll do a short Latihan, or if I want to throw off stuff, like if I feel I've got a lot of gunk in me, I can do a throwing off, clearing kind of Latihan. So I would give it an A plus. I do consider myself to be a deprogrammed Subud member. That is, I don't feel a need to be quoting scripture all the time, so to speak, like some of our friends seem to do on a pretty regular basis. I don't get into the like I said earlier, I've never been to Indonesia and I've never tried to imitate Bapak in those kind of ways that just have to do with culture, really. And but other than that, I would give it an A plus. I don't have any regrets at all. And most of my close friends are Subud members. People that I've known over the years, such as yourself, from very early in the days.
Yeah.
And I can still remember some of your photos of me. First, I think the first group of them had to do with us going on a kind of a double date with a lady who I think has passed on since. She was a close friend of ours in the very early days.
Or Dominique Hildreth.
She was the second one. Yes, yes, yes. Similar story. Yeah, we were. Yeah, she was my favorite woman of all time, one might say, or at least in the top three. uh, the the other gal I liked a lot, but didn't have a inner feeling to connect with. She wound up getting married. She's since passed on, and they lived like in the after she got married, they lived in more like Central California, maybe near Sacramento.
You're not talking about Sandra.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sandra Spivak.
Yes, her. Yeah, exactly. Sandra Swino.
Yeah, that was her original
when
name.
when we first met her. Yeah, and Dominique Hildreth was don't tell me. Uh, oh,
Olivia.
Olivia High.
Yeah.
High. Yes. Yeah. So names are still there. In fact, one way I'm good with names isn't like trying to remember them while talking to someone, but while looking at your photos and being asked to give some of the names of the people in the photos, that I can usually do pretty easily.
Yeah.
When I'm just sitting by myself and looking at photos. Yes, yeah. So you took some pictures of me with Sandra, and then I think the ones with Dominique were a little bit later on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was very close to her, and then someone who I will never forgive, uh, not not Mr. Hildreth, but that other fellow. She was married to someone else for a while. He scooped her off out of nowhere and took her off to another part of the country, and I had no idea where she had gone to. And of course, back then we didn't have like email or social media. Uh, I can't think of his name at the moment. They they didn't have any children, I think, or did they? Maybe they did have one. Yeah. Huh. Could be. Yeah, it might be that they had one child, and then when she was with Hildreth, they didn't have any children, I don't think. And then she died young. Oh well.
Yeah.
Huh. So yeah, she was one of my favorite people. She was the person that, and it wasn't just physical. For example, I would go to her apartment, and we would trade reading verses from T.S. Eliot's four quartets to each other. That was when I first found out about the T.S. Eliot's poetry was from her. Yeah, memories. Yeah, so that was while I was still living in San Francisco. Oh, one other story, and this is a fairly important story, is that someone that I met socially in San Francisco wasn't yet opened, but I told her about Subud, and she wound up getting opened after a little while. I had gone to an event that involved a non-Subud friend of mine that I had known in my past, and so I was the only Subud person there. So I told her about Subud, and she got interested and wound up getting opened. And then you can after this you'll probably guess who it is. And then um, she was working for someone in San Francisco, and she was like his main secretary. She had mentioned Subud to him, but at that time it was kind of common to ask a Subud member who was a man to explain Subud to another man. So I went to the office and met this person, who at that time wasn't well known. He is well known now. And I explained Subud to him. And he was one of those people, and he got opened and did Latihan for a little while. But he was, again, one of those people kind of like, not for the same reasons, but a little bit like the poet that I mentioned earlier. And so he stayed in mainly to get a taste of what was going on in Subud, because he was trying different things and wound up putting together his own thing that he became famous for. Can you guess who I'm talking about now?
Nope.
Uh, um, um, Werner Erhard, who founded EST.
Okay.
So I'm partly responsible for some aspects of EST.
And who was the woman?
Um, 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 Melinda Plesha,
Okay.
yeah, who at that time was um, Patricia Nyer,
Yeah.
Knier, yeah, and she's gone too. Oh well. Yeah. And I still have to make my will, so I want to do that before I go.
Good idea.
Yes, I started it but haven't finished.
Do you have any other things that you want to have in
Mm,
for you? And
that covers quite a bit. Also, like I like to say, once I got Melinda into Subud, I could have said, okay, my job here is done. Like that's the main thing that I did was tell her about Subud. Because she was Subud USA for about 30 years.
yeah.
And it didn't matter who was the actual chair. So so things are going good. And of course, I'm having the COVID stuck at home blues. I'm starting to go out a little bit more. I actually, in fact, that's why I was a little bit late tonight. I decided to go out to the Fred Meyer pharmacy. And then while I was there, I went shopping for another pair of pants.
Okay.
And, yeah. So I am starting to get out again. And I should start thinking about going to the one of the evening Ladihans in Portland and doing all that sort of thing again, keeping a finger on the pulse of what's going on. I have had the vaccines, the 3 total vaccines.
Mhm.
So that's all I can think of. Feel free to ask me more questions anytime, but
Well, for now, I think that's probably enough. Uh, my last question is, do you agree to having this video available for other people to look at, other Subud members and for the archives, Subud archives?
yes, I do. Also, feel free to edit it. There's been a few times where I took a tangent that doesn't mean much, so
Yeah.
you can chop those out if you want.
That's okay. We'll do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Leonard. I appreciate you doing this.
And thanks to you, yes.
So I'm going to sign out now.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
See you on CalChat maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.